I do want to emphasize that a lot of this stuff about protecting characters, some of it will be applicable directly, but a lot of it we will really get into when we write shell scripts. So that's coming up. We're not there yet. So you want to just keep this in mind, the difference between backslash, double quotes, and single quotes. Single quotes, everything is taken literally. It's a lot stricter. In the book, they talk about this, so here's the table you might want to print out, either the previous slide or this one. Keep it as a handy reference. It gives you the same information as the slide before, but this is straight from the book. Okay, one thing that the book is actually correct on, but it doesn't match the version of Bash that we are going to be using, and that is setting and removing variables. So we just saw how you can set up variables, and it turns out there's a ton of variables that are used. The book uses the command set, which we do not use in our in our version of Bash on the live DVD. Instead, what we have is env. So let's take a quick look at that. So if we set env, we get a huge list of all kinds of shell variables that are defined, that are used quite a bit. So for one thing I can show you is this display is set up to mean the first default display that's connected to the computer. Turns out you can change this. You can change this display variable to refer to any machine that you can get at through the internet. So you can say some IP address :0 or even :1 if there's more than one monitor attached to that computer, and you can display your entire terminal or any of these programs. For example, the browser, you can display it on a computer in Japan if you wanted to, just by setting this display variable. So there's a lot of things here. So for example, the variable home is /home/uwrf. And there's a number of these variables that are used by the shell to change behavior. So one of the things you might notice is there's shell and it's /bin/bash. This is for terminal settings. It uses the terminal settings for xterm. That is a terminal that's displayed inside a graphical user interface. Okay, so env, all it does is show you the values of shell variables, not set, unlike the book says set, but the set doesn't, I don't think does set. Whoa, it does something else. So don't use set, use env. If you want to look at a single variable, you can use echo. So we used that before. We said echo $x. We just happen to have defined x is equal to 5. And if you have defined it, you will see that. If you want to see a single variable like shell, there it is. So if you do env, you get the same information, except you get a lot more information. You get all the variables. And shell is just one of those variables. Here's shell. Shell is equal to /bin/bash. Okay. It turns out the variable shell may not be always what you want to use. For example, if you start up a C shell and you say echo $shell, it still says bash, even though you're not actually running bash. It turns out the more reliable way of figuring out what shell you're using, if you're not sure, is use $0. Sometimes, except for C shell, it doesn't work. So if you exit from here and you say echo $0, it tells you that you're running bash. So for $0 works for some shells, like bash. Let's just try one more dash. Shell tells you that you're running bash, but you know that you're not. You're running dash. Let's see if $0 will work. Yeah, in this case, $0 worked. Tells us that we're running dash. So what is this $0? That tells you basically, it should tell you the program that's currently running, and it's right now it's dash. Let's exit. $0 is now back to bash. Okay. So there's a bunch of variables, and we can change the variables, and some of them will change the behavior of the shell and its commands. So one useful one that I find, to see if I can get into a long a folder that has a directory that has a long path name. So now I'm in workspace, I'm doing ls. I can look in this Ruby folder, and there's one as a file there. I'm looking for a way to get, oh, okay, so here's one. So I'm cding deep into this workspace. You can see where you are. You're in your home folder in workspace, Python 1 source package, and that's it. So let's say I run into this situation a lot where the path is so long it actually goes over this line and goes on into the next line. In those situations, what I want to do is I want to simplify my prompt. I think this is just too much to have in your prompt. So this is one way you can do it. You can set the value of a environment variable, ps1. Oops. Let me just check and see what it is right now. If I do an env, I get a list of all the variables. I'm hoping ps1 is here somewhere. I'm actually not seeing it. Alright, let's just try it. ps1 is equal to, and this is one of my favorites. I'm going to have the current time and the current directory, but not the entire path, be printed out in square brackets, followed by a colon so that it looks like a prompt, and then a space, and then close double quote. So what am I doing here? I'm saying that the prompt string, the primary prompt string, that's the one, means primary, is going to be composed of open square bracket, the current time, the current directory I'm in, but not the complete path. So in this case, I should be in the source directory, but I shouldn't see the rest of this stuff. And then a colon and a space. So if you do that, as soon as you assign ps1 to that value, here's what you get. You get the current time, the current directory, but not the entire path. And this is a lot smaller. And you can change this. You can remove the seconds and stuff like that and just have the current time. So as you hit enter, you go on to the next line. The prompt changes. That is, the time changes. Sometimes it's handy. I just happen to like this one. So where can you run into other prompts? So it turns out there's a secondary prompt, and we sort of saw that. Remember, we were typing in a very long string, and we said, okay, I'm not ready to type in the rest of this, so I'm going to hit enter, and I get a secondary prompt. The greater than sign is the secondary prompt. And then we finish our string with a double quote. Okay, and then prints it out. Well, you can change that secondary prompt by saying ps2, ps2 equals something like something like that. Why? Just cause. Alright, so now it's not obvious it's changed, but let's try getting that secondary prompt. Hello there, comma, and there's our secondary prompt. It's different from before. Alright, so there's a bunch of variables that you can change. We just looked at a couple of them. There are things that could potentially break things, that could change the behavior so much that things don't work anymore. One of them is display. Don't change that for now. Remember that if you put in an IP address, all of the stuff that's supposed to display on your machine will, instead of displaying right here, will display on a completely different machine if you have permissions to do that. And oftentimes you don't, and so luckily changing the display might, at the worst, just make things stop working on your machine. Okay. So you can set variables, you can remove variables using env2 rather than unset. I'm used to using set and unset, and on this machine, on this live DVD, we do not have that. So if you do a man env, you can set variables, you can also unset variables. So let's try env minus, I forgot, minus u. env minus u x. Alright, and then I'll say echo x. Oh, I didn't unset it. I don't know if I'm screwing up the syntax or what. Oh, I think I'm only allowed to change things change these things. So, like, I don't think I can change the x variable. Because there's two kinds of variables. There are these environment variables, and then there are variables that you set up yourself. So I believe the env is only for unsetting or setting environment variables. And actually I don't want to change any of them. But if you do want to change them, use not unset as the book indicates, but env using minus u. Okay, so you can try that. I don't want to mess things up right now, but go ahead and try it. And if you're using a live DVD, because as soon as you boot back up, you can, all of that's gone. Okay, so next up we will take a look at some more meta characters, that is special characters. We'll look at the backtick, and then the semicolon, and the ampersand, and a whole bunch of other meta characters.